Hello and welcome back. We are continuing on with our Bladeguard veterans today. This is going to be kind of our final product here, just to get a quick little look. I showcased it in the first episode, but in case you missed that. And we are continuing on with our other two models. I did do a little bit of cleanup in between parts. Still a little bit more to go, but overall it's kind of good enough for us to get ready for the kind of next few little adjustments we're going to make today. So I think we'll go ahead and start with a little bit of Lead Belcher. We're going to focus on kind of doing these shields up first. It's kind of a good starting point. They're not too difficult to do, so I think they'd be a good kind of point to focus on. And we're using kind of a smaller brush today. We're going to be doing a lot more detail work, so this will help us out tremendously. And we're going to jump right in, get our paint thin as always, and make sure we just don't have too much on our brush. And these shields are pretty nice, especially doing the edges of them. You can just go right along, right on the top, and we'll do the same thing on the kind of inside here. Just want to be a little bit careful on getting that green there. We can fix it if we end up going over it, but for the most part it saves us a lot of time and hassle if we just don't do that in the first place. And doing the inside curve there is the most difficult part I've found. Might take you one or two tries with it being a little bit thinned, but that's fine. And do the same thing on the other side. Perfect. And as always, I don't put nearly enough of paint on our palette, so I'm gonna try to work on that a little bit in the future. And do the same thing, just going along on the rest of the sides and edges here. And again, another curve. I mentioned last time that I've been playing a lot of Space Marine 2. I think the season pass thing, or the battle pass I think they're doing, starts on the 1st of October. I'm very excited for it. It's when season 2 officially starts, I should say. I don't know what all that entails. I got the fancy nerd like $100 edition that has all the DLC and stuff. And I know the roadmap came out. I think Dark Angels are first on the list of updates. I'm very excited for that. If there's one thing that they add that I'm hoping for, it is the Talberd color changes. As much as I like the standard kind of white cloth they start with, I would love to be able to do just a little bit of change to make it more Deathwing themed. But if not, that's fine too. You know, I can take it or leave it. Especially now that I've been trying out some of the other classes. I'm not using the Bulwark nearly as much as I was before, but I still think it kind of looks the coolest. So I'm hoping that they get a little bit of love. I'm also pretty interested to see what they kind of do with adding more classes in the future. They're missing apothecaries, obviously, librarians, and tech marines. So that'd be really nice if they added it in. It is the same engine as World War Z, if any of you guys played that. So I'm kind of thinking they'll kind of go the same route with the character releases that they did with like the class releases in World War Z. I don't know if it's the same company that released it. I think it's like Focus Interactive. I kind of feel like it is. I feel like I remember seeing that logo a lot when I was playing World War Z, so hopefully it is. But I think they definitely did a great job with Space Marine 2. It's a really fun game. My only complaint is the campaign's a little short, but even that's kind of forgivable. I think they did great with what they had. And I think we're kind of finishing up our shield here a little bit as we continue to ramble on. One thing you want to be careful of, I talk about like paint thinning a lot, and I did plenty in my other video, but something I don't really mention as much that I feel like I should touch on is just making sure your paint dries before you go back over it. It'll kind of help with the overall smoothness of your paint when you're finished. And I want to get the back of the shield, so it might be a little bit awkward trying to watch. Fortunately, that's just the way the camera angles are going to go today. But very quick, and we'll make sure we get everything else while we do that as well. I missed a little bit. And you can see there's a little bit of cleanup we have to do, but not nearly as bad as the first time around. So we will kind of get to that soon. Depending on how long this video goes, I'll probably do it again off camera just to save a little bit of time. And, you know, I don't want to waste your guys' time too much. More than I already am, I suppose. And again, just doing kind of the back edge, if I can properly show it to you, is kind of the most awkward bit on those curves. That's fine, we'll deal with it. And for a good stopping point on this guy, I think that's kind of good, for the shield at least. And one more thing we want to take care of while we're here. I think there shouldn't be too much silver on this model. We just want to take care of the sword. And it's very quick and easy. Just a nice little pass over. You might have to do 2 layers just depending on how thin or thick your paint is. And voila, and then we'll turn it around and we'll do the same thing on the other side once we load up our palette a little bit more. But yeah, no, Space Marine 2, very good game. It makes me really hype for more kind of 40k content, especially seeing like the sales numbers. I feel like 40k is going to be a lot more kind of mainstream, I guess, if that's something that it can get to. I wouldn't say it's you know, an exclusive hobby at this point, but it is, you know, more of a niche than anything. It kind of ranks up with like Magic the Gathering, right? Like I feel like the popularity is pretty similar between the two. And now that, you know, we're getting all these shows and there's the Amazon deal with Henry Cavill, I'm hoping we get, you know, a few more people into the club. It'd be nice. But if not, you know, that's fine too. I'll just take more models, please. I've got some interest in the new Blood Angels models. I like the Death Company. I think they came out pretty cool. Their whole box is really nice. But the Bladeguard, or the Sanguinary Guard rather, are really disappointing. I'm sure there'll be like an upgrade sprue that you can buy that has like the proper wings on it, but that just feels kind of scummy. So I'm hoping before final release something with that changes, because man, great models, but the wings are missing and it makes me really sad. And we're going to be touching up this plasma gun here. I think for that kind of middle piece, I'm going to do that like the traditional red. But for the front and back of the gun here, we're just going to go on with the silver. And we'll kind of see what kind of look that gives us in the end. We can always change it if it doesn't look great. But for the most part, I think it should be fine. And actually, I just did a part of it I didn't mean to. It's fine. Everything's fine. I didn't realize that this piece connected up that way, but that's okay. And get a little bit more on our brush here, and we'll do the same thing with the back of our gun. I'm going to be a little bit careful. I don't want to get it on the hand if I can avoid it. And perfect. And we'll do the top as well, and we'll try to do the kind of interior. Might be a little bit awkward, however. If I can, there we go. Always with the weird camera angles. that's kind of the pain of recording these. I can see it just fine, but in terms of getting it on camera, it's a little bit more difficult. And we'll get some more silver, and I didn't realize we didn't do this shield already. That's fine, we'll do that real quickly. Same thing as before, just nice and as neat as we can along these edges. The kind of interior curves here are the most difficult part, but thanks to us using a smaller brush, it's much easier. And we will be touching up these oath papers. I always forget what they're called. The little flowing paper things on here, I think they're called oath papers. I could be totally wrong. I actually have one on my backpack that I carry for work. I've got a bunch of pins and stuff that I put on it, and I've got a couple of the Warhammer related things. I've actually found them on Temu, which super cheap. I'm sure Temu has its own like trouble with counterfeiting and whatnot. But for the most part, all the stuff I get on there is really cheap, and it's pretty decent quality. Not trying to like shill for Temu or anything, but basically everything I have in my backpack I ordered from there for really cheap, including one of those little oath papers. It's pretty neat. I got it for like $4, I think, and I've seen like the official ones sell on Amazon for like $20 roundabout ish. It's a little pin and a papers attached to it. I feel like it's a little bit overpriced. That's all right. I won't complain too much about it. And just one last time. Actually, I didn't get the interior edges here. I'll do that real quick before I forget about it. Without fail, there's always something that I forget to do when it comes to painting these. Some little piece or detail that I miss, and eventually I go back over it, but it sucks missing it in the first place. Fortunately, I'm not using my painting handle today because I am doing two different models. I don't want to keep like switching back and forth between it, but that is something that helps me tremendously, is using that. So something to think about. I actually have it on my desk here. If you haven't seen any of my other videos, I do like to show this thing off. It's the Citadel painting handle. They make a big one for vehicles, and I think it's like $20 for the normal size one. I cannot recommend it enough. If you have very shaky hands like I do, I find it helps me a ton. And we'll try to stay at a good angle here while I do the rest of this. I don't know about the vehicle one yet, or like the XL sized one for bigger models, but I'd imagine it's pretty good. It's just the same thing but bigger, right? I do feel like it'd be a little bit awkward to kind of hold in your hands. I feel like it'd get kind of heavy with those bigger models. And we'll do a little bit of cleanup on this, later. But for now, that's pretty decent. One other thing I want to focus on here, very quickly, while we're doing the shield, is kind of all these little papers that I've been talking about. Close that without peeking the microphone, hopefully. The paper itself, I want to cover with this flayed one flesh. Normally I do something like Ricarth flesh, but I want a little bit more contrast between the wraithbone and the paper itself. So I feel like this is kind of a good in-between. And again, just make sure we're not using too thick of a paint. And actually we'll take a little bit more off our brush, just because we're doing such small little details. We basically just want to get both the little wax part itself and just go down alongside the paper. You might have to do a few passes over just to get full coverage. It is kind of a more difficult paint to use when you're thinning it, just because it's so light, and especially applying it where we have like this green. It's a little bit difficult. It doesn't like to go on dark colors very well, so that does take quite a few layers. And same thing on this one. The paper you don't have to focus too much on in terms of the next part of what we're going to do with this, but the wax part themselves you really want to make sure are a nice light color, because we're going to be using a contrast paint on top of them, and if it's a dark color underneath, it really will not show up very well. So that's kind of something you want to think about. And we're going to do the same thing with this bad boy. I really like these models because of all the oath papers. I think they look great. I don't use them nearly enough on the rest of my models, and I feel like I really need to change that after doing these guys, because they do look great. They add a ton of detail, and they're just really fun to paint, in my opinion. I really like them. And we'll check out this guy. Our sergeant has a ton of them. This guy, I think, has quite a few less, so it should be a little bit quicker. And we'll do the exact same thing, just make sure this is all kind of covered as best we can. And let's look around a little bit. He might have one on the back. No, he doesn't. He only has the one. Our other two models are like covered in them. This dude, he's got what, 4 or 5? Our sergeant has, I think, 4 of them, 5 of them, which makes sense. Being the sergeant and all, you kind of have a ton of accomplishments. You got a lot of papers on you. It's good stuff. And The paper itself I don't really care about too much right now, but I do want to focus on the little wax seals. I want to make sure those are a nice bright color like I said before. And while we wait for that to dry, we will do our kind of leather bits, which I think are just the holster and the scabbard. I'm going to close this without peeking the microphone. Perfect. We're going to be using dryad bark. And make sure we give it a nice good shake. Some of these darker colors you don't have to worry about too much. The pigment tends to not separate as much as with the lighter colors. But I still like to give them a good shake before I use them anyway. It helps with kind of the consistency of the paint itself. And same thing as before, just make sure it's nice and watered down. And we're going to be at a kind of weird angle here, just because I don't want to get any on the armor itself. But as best as we can. And maybe this was a little bit too watery. That's fine, we'll roll with the punches. Just want to get all of that leather. And we want to do the same thing from the sides here. Just being very careful not to get any of it on that wraith bone if we don't want it there. And this is definitely going to take us a couple of layers, but that's fine. This is a good starting point. And again, I'll just do all the cleanup kind of in between videos, so I don't have to sit here and make you guys watch it. But it's essentially the same thing, just over again, in case you want to see it for some reason. Which, if that's something that annoys you, me skipping the cleanup, let me know. Drop a comment, and I'll definitely try to rectify that in the future. But I think for now, it just doesn't really make sense to show it, unless for some reason you guys want to see it. And we'll do the same thing with this scabbard here. Try to make our paint a little bit less thin by adding more of it to the palette. And we will do the exact same thing all over again. And we want to be a little bit careful with that bronze. We don't want to go over it. Thankfully it is raised up, so it's not really that much more difficult to do. And your brush just kind of naturally goes around it. Perfect. And you can see my hands are getting a little bit shaky now. Unfortunately, not using that paint or model holder, which is unfortunate, but I'll deal with it. It's just something you kind of learn to deal with eventually, is making mistakes because of your shakiness and just going back over it anyway. So I don't really mind when models end up looking a little bit sloppy the first or second go around, just because I'm used to it. And I don't show it. But when I do my cleanup, it takes me quite a while. Like on camera, we're going through everything quite quickly, relatively, and it takes me like 20 minutes to do an episode. But when I'm doing cleanup, it takes me quite a lot longer than that. Sometimes it'll take me like an hour or two just to kind of go back over and fix everything. So that's kind of something to think about if you're jumping into this hobby and you see me doing all of this. You're thinking like, wow, he's really quick, relatively. I've seen people do this way quicker and look much better, but that's all right. It's just something to keep in mind, is it actually takes me like 4 to 5 times longer than what you're seeing. So don't be discouraged by kind of how fast or slow you are. As long as your model looks good, take your time. It doesn't really matter how long you take. What matters is whether you're happy with it or not. And that kind of goes for everything in this hobby. If you don't like the color scheme I'm going for, and maybe you like parts of it but you don't like the entirety, maybe you want to change the brass to more silver or a more gold color, you do what you want. You make sure that your model looks however you like it to look, because at the end of the day, the one who's going to be looking at it the most is you. Unless you're doing it for like a competition piece, or you're making it for like someone else, like commission wise or something, or maybe you're making it for a friend. Paint it exactly how you want it, and don't stop painting it until you're happy with it. Or if you feel the need to strip the whole model and start over again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a little bit annoying to do sometimes, just because you have to restart, or going over the same part over and over until you're really happy with it. Can get a bit tedious, but overall there's nothing wrong with just really relaxing, taking your time, and just having fun with it. That's kind of the most important part in terms of this hobby is just have fun. Don't worry about chasing metas too much when you're putting your units together. If you're really that bothered about like gameplay wise, magnetize your models. Make it so you can swap out all of your arms and weapons and whatnot. But other than that, just build whatever you think looks cool. You know, in terms of gameplay, like models are constantly getting new rules, and rules are being updated all the time. So don't worry about that too much. That's why I don't really care about like what is technically the best on the table. I don't really play the tabletop too much, and even if I did, it's not big enough of a deal whether I win or lose that it really changes like what I'm gonna use on my units. I like plasma guns a lot, so I'm gonna slap some more plasma guns on my guy. If plasma guns are bad for some reason in the future, well, cool. Whatever. I'll deal with it when it comes. But I'm not changing anything just because the rules change or whatever. But with that being said, we are probably going to wrap this up for now. When we come back, we'll probably hit some more of these details, and then I think hopefully next episode we will do some washes and we'll kind of finish up. But other than that, I'll do a little bit of cleanup in between. Just a quick shout out as we kind of show off what we've done. I do have a Patreon. Link is in the description as always. And of course, helping me with that does get more videos out more frequently. Helps me get more combat patrols, right? So we can kind of show off new models and more tutorials and whatnot. Other than that, I really appreciate anytime you guys like, comment, or subscribe. It helps me get feedback and generally just helps improve the channel. So if you have any feedback at all, feel free to leave it as always. Other than that, hopefully you enjoyed this part, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.